Hello, everyone. I'm Chris Kapchis, CEO of Chestnut Park Real Estate. I'm thrilled today to be doing I think it's our seventh podcast.
That's correct.
But this one is a unique podcast.
It's an away game.
It's yes, because we're not doing it in our typical sort of, I'll say, studio location. We're actually doing it in a restaurant not far from our offices at Chestnut Park. Actually, Doug can introduce himself and also tell us a little bit about where we are.
Yeah, I'm Doug Gubitz. I'm the president of Chestnut Park, and delighted to be here on our first, as I said, away game. This is the restaurant known as Terroni. We're in Rosedale. Terroni is a landmark. Wouldn't you agree? A landmark
100%.
Of Rosedale. I've hosted many, many family events here over the years, birthdays, anniversaries, all sorts of parties. It's been a terrific venue for all of that. And this is an integral part of the Rosedale community, this restaurant. So we're
Quite
delighted to have been invited to do our first away game here. I'm thrilled about this.
Not only were we invited to do our, to put it with your language, our first away game.
It is an away game.
But they've also provided us with the wines that we're going to be decanting today.
Yes. Don't forget what the name of this podcast is.
Decanting Real Estate.
Nice.
I got it.
This is the first time you got it right.
I got it. Decanting Real Estate. Someone was suggesting that we add uncorking.
I know,
to it, but we
have nixed that idea.
Shelved that for the time being.
Shelved is a good word.
And we're a little bit out of our league as far as these wines are concerned. At least I am.
I would agree with that.
Because up until now, as those that have been following the podcast know, we've done Bordeaux's coming from
three times.
From Doug's wine cellar.
2 wins, 1 failure.
Well,
2 wins, 1 failure.
And then we shifted to Prince Edward County.
All wins.
All wins.
Yeah. Those were fantastic.
And no doubt we'll come back to
what?
Both Bordeaux's and the Ontario wines.
I thought you were off Bordeaux now.
I'm not totally off it, but it's
I have
summertime.
some surprises.
In fact,
I'll reinvigorate
even
you.
today, walking down here, it's almost 30 degrees. Bordeaux's are not the best wines to be drinking. In any event, so these are the wines. So I'm going to start.
You can say that about any red wine.
That is probably true. Have Doug pour.
Oh, exciting. We're going to do both.
As is customary,
Yes.
Before we get into the subject matter of our podcast,
and then we have to describe,
which is really going to be an exciting podcast.
It will be. But we have to describe these beautiful wines. And we have tasting notes as well.
We have tasting notes that have been supplied actually by
this one.
By the wine merchants.
Yes, the négociant.
And the négociant. Very well
C'est correct,
said.
monsieur? Négociant. Bon.
We have a French producer, so
we do.
We have to occasionally give some credit to the French language as well.
Oh, look at this beautiful color. Look
Cavinona. We have. I'm not familiar with the grapes in the white.
Okay.
But the wine is a Vesuvio Capeltone.
We're talking about the white.
Yeah, 2022. Before I actually read the tasting notes,
yes.
I'm gonna taste.
Yes, absolutely. You can't be kind of
the
influenced by the tasting.
And I might add, the glasses are brilliant.
They are beautiful. Thank you very much for having delivered these. Those are
beautiful nose, Doug.
Can you hold on? Can you kind of
producer? Yeah, just
slide those over to there. Would you mind, Chris?
I'll pass these over to.
That's the word. Pass them over. And there, that one too.
A third opinion.
Yes.
Although we'll disregard it.
You didn't hear that, Mr. Producer.
Beautiful nose.
Wow. Oh my. Tremendous fragrance.
This is a lovely wine.
Lots of floral notes in there.
And it's interesting you'd say that because you've.
I haven't read. No,
but you've touched on the tasting notes. It's described as a golden yellow with aromas of yellow flowers, freshly picked yellow plum, apricot, lemon juice. I did get the lemon juice. The next one is wonderful. Whiffs of saffron.
Wow, this is a very complex
And
white wine.
mineral notes. And you do get the mineral notes
Yeah.
here. And you know why we're getting the mineral notes?
Let me think for a second. Why would you get mineral notes? Is it near a volcano?
Correct.
There you go.
So the minerality in the soil
Yeah.
is coming through
Yeah.
in the tasting notes.
What volcano might that be?
Vesuvius.
And we were there recently.
we were there. We were there. Sorrento,
Yeah, but we
right across the bay,
in Naples.
Naples. Yeah. So
This is absolutely
it
delicious.
is. It's brilliant.
Very
isn't
impressive. Incredibly complex.
it? Yeah. Brilliant.
So much going on in this wine.
And I think there's
And-
our audience will actually see these wines.
Yes, you've got the labels correct. You saw those before. You don't often get the complexity of white wine that this is delivering.
It's
This
amazing.
is beautiful.
And I think all those tasting notes are found in this wine.
Fantastic. Very, very impressive.
Shall we get into the?
I want to have some more before we go.
I want
the
you to
nose
say
is
compass
really-
mentis, okay? Don't forget, for those that aren't aware of this, we're doing this podcast much earlier than we normally do.
Yeah.
And I don't think either Doug or I, at least I speak for myself, are used to drinking this early in the morning.
Well, I think you should speak for
So
yourself.
we have some important subjects to talk
Yes,
about. So I
we have two
suggest
very
that we
important
leave
ones.
the red,
Okay.
let it open.
Yeah.
It's a big red.
I'm just going to smell it. Can we do that?
Okay, you could do that.
Oh, very delicate. Very
and,
delicate.
We'll get into it a little
Yes.
further in the podcast.
Great idea.
Now, I think you had a subject you wanted to start with.
I did?
You did.
No, I didn't.
Yes, you did.
No, I didn't.
Oh, my God. When
What?
did Toronto real estate become unaffordable?
Oh, that was your
I-
topic for
No,
crying
it's
out
not my
loud. No, I
topic.
wanted to do the second one. It's the first. This is really mostly your topic. Anyhow, of
Oh.
course, there was a very, very interesting article in the Globe and Mail on May 1st, I believe, and it tweaked both Chris and I's in my interest as to when. And really, the thrust of the article is when did Toronto real estate become so unaffordable? What was effectively the turning point? And I'll let you go on from there.
I think you should talk about it because I'm gonna counter whatever you say.
Oh, is that the surprise?
That's a surprise.
Oh, I hate surprises. So the author of this article, I think very, very well written, short article, Hanif Bayat, a PhD, and the CEO and founder of WOA, a Canadian personal finance platform. Nicely written article. The author's opinion is combined two factors. One, the ratio between consumer, the cost of borrowing, and of course, percentage of household income that's applied to your housing. And it ranges around Canada, United States, and Britain about 6 times your annual income, sometimes 7 times. But all of a sudden, it started climbing in around 2015 to as much as 16 times. And what was the break point in this person's opinion as to why Canada real estate, particularly, I would say it applies in Canada, in Toronto?
I think it's Toronto
It's
centric
mostly Toronto
and Vancouver pretend.
for our two most expensive cities. What was the event? And this author brings it down to the meltdown in the U.S. Mortgage market, the subprime lending market in 2007, 2008. When banks were taking back millions of power of sales, or in the United States, foreclosures. And in order to make sure that didn't happen in Canada, the Canadian government and the Bank of Canada reduced rates to effectively nothing.
Bank rate was down to
0.
0.25%.
Or actually, I think even below.
Yeah.
And the author's position is, as a result of the essentially zero interest rate, investors started pouring into the Canadian marketplace.
And keep that thought in mind because it'll take us to our next subject.
And the reason it was so inflationary in his or her opinion was because we didn't have a commensurate level of supply. We didn't have a mortgage meltdown situation in Canada like the United States did. In fact, I ChatGPT'd it. And between...
You actually did?
I did. Between 2007 and 2009 in the United States, there were about 3.8 million foreclosures. I didn't do it on a commensurate basis in Canada, but my instinct is it's virtually none. There were very few foreclosures in Canada during the 2007-2008 meltdown. And no new supply was really therefore coming to market.
We had a different banking system, and
True.
we didn't get into those. I forget that there was an acronym for them. No money down, less the
Jumbo mortgages.
Yeah, no, that wasn't the acronym.
That was the United States situation where they're lending you 115 or 120% of the value of the property.
Yeah, the loan was greater than the
value of the appraised value.
Yeah, we didn't have that situation here in Canada, so our borrowers were less exposed.
Right.
But I think you're right, and there was a confluence, if I could use that term, of all those events around that time.
So as mortgage rates were dropped to effectively nothing, and investors move into the marketplace, and there's no elasticity in supply, meaning there is no new supply coming on in Canada, investors eat up all the property and prices go crazy because we have no supply, but an enormous amount of demand, not just domestic homeowner demand, investor demand. And this author believes that was the turning point in Canadian history where...
I think he's wrong.
Okay.
I think he's wrong.
Okay. You didn't always think he was wrong. Did you just come to this?
Well, I've been doing some research since we hit upon that that article. And actually, the research surprised me because I thought I intuitively knew.
I would have thought you would have too.
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
But I think unaffordability started in 1970.
Oh boy, here we go.
1970. And it has been this incremental, but almost invisible kind of nightmare that has been happening. And we were in it, but no one has ever seen it. For example, let me give you some numbers. At the beginning of the 70s, 1970, do you know what the average sale price was in the city of Toronto?
79,000?
30,000.
Okay.
Do you know what it was at the end of the 70s?
So 1979, I would say 80,000.
Perfect. Do you know what the growth rate?
2.5 times?
166%.
2.5 times.
Then we start in 1980 with the average sale price being $80,000. And where are we when we finish in 1989, 1990? Average sale price?
280?
261,000.
Good guess, I'd say.
261,000. Do you know what the growth rate was in percentage terms?
3 times?
226%.
2.25 times.
Yeah. Where were we at the end of the 90s?
Average sale price?
Yeah.
360 something?
No, less than we were at the beginning.
Oh, sorry. Yes, of course. Yeah. We went through the massive recession.
So no growth whatsoever.
Right.
And then if we look at the first decade in the 2000s, we go from 251,000 to basically 430,000. What's the growth rate?
Double.
What's the growth rate?
From what to what?
From 251,000 to basically 400 odd thousand.
So almost double. So
71%.
Yeah.
71%. And then we go through the latter part of the 20s, getting us closer to where we are today.
Yeah.
210 to basically 220. We go from 431,000 to 929,000.
Okay.
It's about 115% growth rate. So, but my point in pointing all of this out is this growth has been happening on a consistent basis since 1970. There was no one inflection point, in my opinion, that has brought us to where we are today. And in fact, let me just add one little last comment. Since 2000 to where we are today, 2025, growth rate has only been 23%. It's the slowest growth of average sale prices that we've had, basically excluding the 1990s, since 1970. So I don't think you can attribute one inflection point as that author has to the growth of average sale prices and ultimately, therefore, unaffordability.
But it's tied into the ratio of income to house value that you're not addressing in this incremental growth of housing.
Fair
prices.
enough, but the average sale price continued to go up.
Right.
Continue to go up. And it's not going up a lot now, but yet we're still unaffordable. It's
At
sticky,
11
it's
times
staying.
average
We're at about
income.
1,150,000 currently.
Yeah.
And it's staying at that number. So I think it's an insidious growth that we don't notice, but it's happening all the time. Then all of a sudden, particularly politicians will say, whoa, we got a problem. We got to deal with it. But by then, all of this stuff is creating structural matters that aren't easily undoable. And I might add, this is not why are you smiling?
I'm listening to you intently. I'm just thinking about the counter argument.
This is not strictly a Toronto or Vancouver problem.
Right. It's Western
we
Europe
should move
as well.
a little further because
it's all of the Western Hemisphere.
Exactly.
now.
In fact, as you
All
know,
of Europe.
Spain and Barcelona are kind of ground zero for unaffordability.
And England.
Amsterdam,
Yeah,
Rome,
definitely the Netherlands.
Paris,
Yep.
you name the big
Yep.
capitals of
Yep.
Europe, they're all suffering.
Yep,
In
for
fact,
sure.
I did a little research, and you and I talked about it before this podcast. And in Spain, I discovered 10% of all housing is owned by investors.
And what do
It
you
goes
think?
back to your commodification.
Well, yeah, but what do you think it is here?
I don't think
Because
it's
that's really the
10%.
thrust of this
Maybe
article.
condominiums, but not freehold.
But we don't have those numbers.
They have a different type of housing tenure there. A lot of it is what we would normally think of as condominiums or co-ops.
There's a lot of
But
leasehold as well.
10%, that's a lot. And what those investors have determined is that if they make more money if they go short term, as opposed to putting it in the open market as rental units.
Do you think you may be not giving enough weight to this investor phenomenon that we've experienced in Toronto, particularly?
In the case of condos, I would agree.
It's
I don't think
probably
it's
60% of the condo world is
Yes,
owned by investors.
but I don't believe that in the case of, and we've had a podcast where we talked about the investors and the horrible nature of the housing form that was built in the condos in Toronto, and I suspect in Vancouver as well. Although we're not familiar with that market to the extent that we are here.
So you think this
horrible little matchboxes?
Your point that house prices have been going up steadily from 1970 onwards doesn't account for the income ratio to purchase price that we are now experiencing like we've never experienced before. It's the bigger problem is incomes have not kept up with the inflationary cycle of houses.
That's true.
And that's really more the thrust of this.
And
right?
affordability
the multiples
has not kept up with things like immigration and the demand that immigration has created. And then on top of that, if we throw in the investor, if you're warm, you should take your jacket off.
Go ahead.
Look, speaking of Spain, and in particular Barcelona. In Barcelona, as you know, there are demonstrations now
on the streets
on a regular basis. One, against tourism, but more importantly, against the lack of housing and the affordability of housing.
Yeah, but tourism is really what's driving that agenda immediately. Like they are overwhelmed by tourists and the Airbnb phenomenon, which is crushing people who are living there. They can't tolerate it anymore.
And those properties that have not gone into investors' hands or have gone into investors' hands but are in the pool of long-term rentals, rents have gone up by almost 60% in the last few years. So it's become really crucial to, I think, to the fabric of housing in a place like Spain and the other European
For sure, there's all sorts
capitals.
of cities.
And of course, we'd be remiss if we didn't mention the litigation that's going on now in Spain. You probably have heard, maybe you would talk about it.
No, you talk about it.
A Spanish court has ruled that effectively all Airbnb listings are illegal. 66,000 are illegal. And they've ordered them all to be taken down.
It's going to happen in Italy as well, because Venice, for example, is completely overrun by Airbnbs. Forget about all of the cruise ships that are piling in and the ecology is being destroyed by it as well. So this is a massive problem.
It is a massive problem. So we talk about it because we're obviously Toronto centric. That's what we decant
Right.
as far as real estate is
Oh, can we
concerned.
try the red now?
Just a moment.
Oh,
As far as real estate is concerned, but I think we need to let our audience know that this is a bigger problem, a bigger world problem than just Toronto. As I said,
yeah,
particularly
you can easily blame the various levels of government in Canada, municipal, provincial, and federal, for our housing crisis. But as you well pointed out, this is a crisis across the Western Hemisphere.
Mhm.
Every European country is dealing with the exact same problems that we are, and there is no one solution.
There's no one solution,
There's
and
no-
I think we, and sort of
That's a theme of everything
yeah,
we've been
sort of
talking about. There's no one solution.
wrapping up this sort of subject is our audience probably knows, both at the provincial level, the Ford government has put forward legislation
Yeah.
to build homes faster. In fact,
Yeah.
I think that's almost the name of the
Build
legislation.
better homes faster or something.
And at the federal level, the new Liberal government is talking about
The GST.
eliminating the GST for certain buyers.
Yeah.
But in my opinion, none of that is going to be immediately helpful. This problem, that's why I said started in 1970, imperceptible, but started in 1970, has now become ingrained in the fabric of our housing world, and it just cannot be changed by the stroke of a pen, creating legislation.
If prices were ever going to go down to accommodate the lack of increase in people's salaries, this was the moment in the last year or two.
Correct.
But as we talk about the stickiness of
Hasn't
house
happened.
prices, it hasn't
Hasn't happened. Again, I'm going to repeat, average sale price in
Yeah.
Toronto, including condominium apartments, which are in terrible shape,
Yeah.
is $1,150,000. If we look at just freehold, we're probably closer to 1.7, 1.8.
And we predicted, or you particularly, and I supported your position, that average house prices were going to go down over the course of the post-pandemic era to about $925 to
That's what I
$950
thought.
on an average basis.
Which based
Which
on
makes
what happened in
perfect
the
sense.
90s makes sense.
Perfect sense. Well, because we were anticipating the same outcome, the same dynamic that happened from 1990 to 1995. We expected it to be the same again,
Yeah.
but it certainly has not been.
And I
the
think
case.
anyone that's hoping for prices to come down,
Never. It's not
going to happen.
I mean,
and given this information that I've provided, in the little research that I did, it clearly indicates that it's a path that we're on, that unless there are transformational changes, it isn't going to
but
change.
can you kind of even contemplate one of those transformational
I can't.
changes would be?
I can't.
Yeah.
I can see little incremental changes
Yeah.
over time,
Yeah.
but that's not going to change the cost of housing.
It's
Now,
kind of a sad indictment.
It is a sad indictment. But I think people should accept it, acknowledge it, and then maybe you could work towards it in a way that you can have a positive outcome, as opposed to these micromanaged solutions, which aren't real solutions.
Yeah, but if you pile up a lot of these smaller solutions, sooner or later something might happen. But boy, they're tough to make changes. We talked about this, like even an initiative like allowing 4-unit buildings on residential streets. Even that is getting tremendous pushback. We'll
Yeah.
raise another case.
If I may, can I be Greek for a moment?
As compared to not being Greek.
It's a Sisyphean task.
Sisyphean task. You want to tell us about Sisypheus?
You know who.
I don't remember now.
It's okay. Doesn't matter.
Okay.
Doesn't matter. I think it's time to
Yes.
tell me about that red.
Okay. No, first you have to try it.
Huh?
You have to try it.
Oh, okay.
Otherwise, you're going to be negative. You're going to be
Oh, the
adversely
nose
influenced.
is brilliant.
It's very light.
Oh, it's interesting that
Very
someone
light.
would nose a wine and say that it's light.
Yeah,
As
it's not an
opposed to
overwhelming
heavy.
nose.
Yeah,
It's not an overwhelming
but
nose.
it's a charming nose.
It's light. It's a beautiful color, too, we didn't mention. It's almost burgundian. I know we keep saying going back to that, but it's a very light color.
It's got tannins.
I would say this wine is very young.
Yep.
Yeah,
This
but
wine-
it's not resolved yet.
No, this
But-
wine could sit.
This sit for a long, long time, which is consistent with where it's from.
Yeah. And what's it? What?
So this is a Nebbiolo, 100%, from La Mora in Alba. So, Langhe Nebbioli DOC, Filari Corti 2022.
Yeah, 2022.
It needs more
It
time,
needs at least 3
but
more
there's a
years.
huge amount of potential in this wine.
It just fills your, considering it's got such a light nose, when you drink it, it literally fills your mouth, almost like a hand is going in there and squeezing the inside of your mouth.
Good Lord. But there's nice fruit that is going
Very
to
nice
that
fruit,
will
yeah.
resolve very well when these tannins start
Correct.
to settle down. I think it's going to be a beautiful
Yeah.
wine.
What's the
Well,
note
maybe
say?
with 2 hours of decanting, it might be a little bit more approachable now. Light, translucent, ruby red color with garnet hues and fragrant nuances of flower and fruit.
All of that.
Violet. Oh, you'll love this. Withered red petals.
Withered red.
I mean, I picked up the red petals, but not the withered
Yes.
red petals.
Are they rose petals we're talking about?
Strawberry, roseberry, and orange petals.
Mm.
And
Because I got a little bit
yeah,
of the
of course
rose.
you did. You're good at that. And subtle hints of licorice root.
Oh, not just
licorice.
the root.
I caught that.
I didn't.
Yeah, I can easily distinguish
Let me
between
see if
licorice
I
and
can get the
licorice
root.
root. I mean, any self-respecting wine person would know that.
I get the licorice. I don't get the root.
On the palate, it is medium-bodied with velvety tannins and lively acidity. I agree with that,
Mm-hmm.
but the tannins still need some time.
Yes.
This wine pairs beautifully with rich dishes like I can't pronounce it, alla ragu, porcini mushroom risotto, and roasted meats such as duck and lamb.
I would agree.
Anyhow, this was a pleasure to taste both of these wines, and very nice that they provided these.
Oh yeah,
to
we
us.
did
How
definitely need a
lovely.
shout out to
That was so nice.
Terroni, to Anna, and
To the Cavinoni,
Cavinoni,
Nona.
as you said, the negociant.
Yeah, negociant. They were very generous, and these are beautiful.
They're
The
lovely.
the white in particular is a treat,
Lovely.
total treat.
But we have to be aware of time.
Yeah, we have an interesting case to braise.
Yeah.
Last time we did the case on the keys, and we got really good.
Yeah,
really
a lot of
good.
feedback on that.
A lot of good
and,
feedback on
the
the
suggestion
keys.
was that we do others, and one came to our attention, which I think is really relevant today, in that there are financial issues out there. Obviously, we talked about affordability at the beginning of this podcast, and some people are getting to the point where they're incapable of closing their transactions. And I think the reason why this case is important is because the buyer raised a number of defenses, which, had they been successful, would have literally changed the jurisprudence.
We're delighted that they didn't change that.
Yeah, I feel badly for the buyer. If
A lot of circumstances conspired against these poor buyers.
Yes.
It was a pretty sad story.
It's a very
I
sad
mean, it's a sad story in the first world sense of the situation, but should we go over the facts a
yeah,
little
why
bit?
don't you go over the facts?
So, family purchased a property in Burlington in, of all times, February 2022, which in and of itself was an unfortunate situation. Arguably the highest price in Canadian history.
I even know the price.
Okay.
$1,322,000.
Okay. So they bought it in the highest month ever at $1,350,000.
That's what they paid.
That's what they paid. They were in a bidding war. And to win the day, they removed all of their conditions.
No condition on financing, no condition on building inspection.
Correct.
Which are, in today's market, quite typical.
Or the sale of their house.
Or the sale of their house, because they had a house in Hamilton.
They had a house in Hamilton. So this family were planning on purchasing this house with two forms of funding. One, the buyer had inherited $565,000 US, which was in Afghanistan. And she was hoping to get that money.
Bad time to have money in Afghanistan.
Bad time. It became a really bad time. It was a bad time to begin with. It got really ugly. And they had a house in Hamilton that they were going to sell. And the combination of the $565,000 US and the proceeds of the sale from Hamilton were going to purchase, and some cash they had, this $1.35 million house in Burlington. But as a result of the ongoing conflicts in Afghanistan and the subsequent withdrawal of American forces, created a power vacuum in Afghanistan, as this author says, and the banking system was suspended. And they could then she could no longer get her money out of Afghanistan. To make matters worse for them, they weren't able to sell their house in Hamilton. So they were in a position, clearly, where they couldn't close this deal, and they didn't. Even though it had a very long closing. They bought it in February, and the closing was to be in July. They had asked for an extension of 45 days from the seller in July for a further 45 days, which was denied by the seller.
Which is a seller's right, to be clear.
Yeah, and that's
important that we state that, because it forms part of the defense that they raised.
So, the seller, of course, now goes and takes 6 months to resell the property.
And we should make it clear for those that don't understand the process. If a buyer fails to close, the seller has an obligation to mitigate their damages. So they have to go back to market.
And mitigation means?
It means to reduce their losses in general terms.
Right.
Their damages.
Right. So the seller suffered damages. They have to do what they can to minimize the extent of
Correct.
that. So, and in real estate, they have to go back to market in a timely fashion.
And the seller did in this case.
And they did. They entertained a number of offers. Nothing came together. A few deals fell apart. They finally sell it 6 months later for 1.1, I believe.
Right.
So they lost essentially $250,000 plus expenses. They sue the defendant, the first buyer, for that loss. And they raise really three interesting...
The buyer raises.
The buyer as a defense as to why they weren't able to close. They raise three kind of, let's say, excuses that they're hoping the judge would entertain as reasons for not having to close.
It's very important for people to hear this, because the judge didn't at the end of the day. And I'm not giving anything away by saying that. But what are the three?
So the first one was a legal doctrine called force majeure. You can talk about
force majeure. Go ahead. I think you're good at it.
So force majeure means, well, something, I entered into a contract with you, but some cataclysmic event took place between the time we entered into a contract and the time we have to complete the contract. Things like, I don't know.
Civil War,
a tidal wave.
Maybe the fires that we're actually currently experiencing in...
that would be extreme weather events.
Exactly.
Right? And they're often explained, force majeure events are called acts of God. In other words, there's no way either of the two parties could have controlled that. And accordingly, I don't have...
I love that urban vibe that we just got there.
I love this urban vibe. Anyhow, so...
I think that's actually a rural vibe.
Rural vibe, that's true. But it's urban in the sense we get to enjoy it here, urbanly.
Yes.
So that was their first defense. Well, you know what? That event, which was the withdrawal of American forces from Afghanistan and the closure of the banks, was kind of like essentially a force majeure act of God. Their second defense, which was a very interesting one, is that the contract was frustrated. That's a doctrine of law called frustration of contract. I'm going to ask you to chime in on this, because it was a very awkward argument that they made. A frustrated contract is an unforeseeable event occurring after the formation of a contract that renders the contract unable to be performed.
Correct.
Their argument was the reason it was unable to be performed was because, A, they couldn't get their money out of Afghanistan, and 2, they couldn't sell their house.
Right.
Do you know why the judge dismissed that?
No.
Because
I do, but I thought you needed a rhetorical
I think
question.
It's because it's not the person's, one of the parties' inability to perform. It's the actual act of the contract being unable to be performed. So the frustration,
and that's a very good distinction.
It's not like, oh, I'm so frustrated, I can't perform the contract.
Yeah.
That's not.
I can't get my money from Afghanistan. I can't sell my house.
So I'm frustrated.
So I'm frustrated, and therefore the contract is at an end.
Right, but it's not that. It's that the contract itself is frustrated. Neither party is in a position to be able to close. What would be a frustrated contract? What would be an event that would qualify as a frustrated?
I'm just going to go out on a limb.
Because I was thinking
And
about that. I don't know
I'm
what
going to
that is.
think back to my old law school days.
Yeah.
You and I contract, we're merchants. You contract to buy certain products that I'm importing, say, from the Caribbean.
Yep.
And while that ship is coming to Canada,
It sinks.
it sinks. I think that would be a frustration of contract because
It's not your fault.
it's not my fault, not either one of our faults.
Right.
The product that we contracted for
And
couldn't be delivered.
it's not an act of God.
And it's not an act of God.
So, needless to say, the judge dismissed that argument as well. And then there was the third one.
Third one, which I found the most interesting
And
one.
the most important to us.
Yeah. I've never seen it
Because we don't
raised
come
before.
across force majeure
No,
or frustration matters very often in our day-to-day work, but we do come across extensions of closings.
Correct. Constantly.
Yeah, and the defendant's position, i.e. the buyers, was, well, we asked for an extension, and you, Mr. Seller, wouldn't give us that extension, and had you, your damages would have been substantially reduced.
Yeah, because they claimed with the extension, maybe they could have gotten the money out of Afghanistan,
Right.
and maybe they could have gone back to market in Hamilton
Exactly.
and sold that
Right.
property
and
had
your
funds.
damages would be reduced.
Correct.
So you prevented me, the owner prevented me from mitigating because you didn't give us the extension. That was dismissed as well.
Yeah.
Because no seller is obligated
Correct.
to extend
And
the contract.
there's a term. What's the term
Well, it's
in every contract?
Your
Real estate contracts. Time.
time is of the essence, and that is the time. The closing date is time is of the essence.
Correct.
And that's simple. And plus, it's not contracted for. It was in the four corners of the agreement. That's the agreement date.
Correct.
That's the closing date. I have no obligation to.
No force majeure
No
frustration.
No frustration.
and no right to an
To-
extension
right.
on the part of a buyer under these circumstances. So that's all very important for
It
people
is.
to know because there are situations coming up, primarily in the condo and new construction area,
Yeah.
where builders are now starting to take action against
Buyers.
buyers who are unable to close,
and they're going to lose.
and they're going to lose because I think they, in some cases, like to raise arguments like this, but they're not going to be entertained by the court.
Well, it's actually even a little bit surprising that they did raise these arguments. We can't comment on that.
I don't think I should go there.
No,
I think
but it was surprising to read.
privately we could.
We could force
do that.
majeure and frustration didn't naturally lend themselves as decent arguments in this.
What do you think of these wines, Doug?
So I think the white is absolutely exceptional. I really enjoyed the whites that you served from the county. They were brilliant. But this is something very, very special.
I hope Terroni invites us back.
I hope so too, because we've been blessed with some very nice wines today.
Why don't you give Terroni one last shout out?
Yeah, this
before
was a very special opportunity for us, and we are indeed grateful to be in the home of Rosedale and for you to have given us these wonderful wines and this venue. We're delighted, and maybe you'll do it again and allow us to be back. This has been a treat. Thank you very much
Cheers
for the
to
opportunity.
Terroni.
Yeah,
Thank
thanks,
you,
guys.
everyone.
Oh wait,
What?
we have a
Oh yes, a little teaser.
a teaser. How do we do that without really giving it away?
Well, you can talk about the subject.
Yeah, so we're gonna an interesting topic that keeps coming up in real estate is real estate sales, particularly both from a
Something
buyer.
that we have to decant,
We have to do.
or maybe uncork.
No, we're not doing the uncorking. It's the concept of stigma, and what is the stigma? What are the obligations of buyers and sellers and agents with respect to stigma? Fascinating stuff.
And very emotional too.
It's emotional. It's unclear. I think it's going to make for a very interesting.
I think so too.
Conversation.
And we're going to bring some American stuff into that
we have
conversation as well.
We have actually data from almost every state.
Every state
as to how they manage stigma, and then we'll bring it all back to how Ontario, Canada, and other provinces in Canada manage their own stigma disclosure matters. It is a touchy topic, but I think it's important.
I think it is as well.
Yeah.
Anyways, until then,
I'm looking forward to that. Thank
thank you, everyone.